The UK economy faced a major financial crisis, only averted by an extraordinary intervention by the Bank of England.
A currency collapse, soaring borrowing rates, investors and businesses in despair. And that in just the span of a week.
Earlier this month, the Bank of England warned that inflation will climb to just over 13% this year, the highest level since 1980.
The government has lost control of the British economy.
It's a mutiny in the UK, or rather, in their economy. Britain is facing an economic collapse that is quickly becoming unavoidable, with its citizens clamoring for assistance and politicians squabbling amongst themselves. It's time to take a closer look at what's really going on. This video is your guide to understanding the growing crisis and what lies ahead for the United Kingdom if current trends continue. Hold on to your hats, it may not be pretty. Who knew that the UK, one of history's leading economies, would be reduced to disarray? With inflation exceeding 10%, food prices climbing faster than ever before, and wages lagging behind, it seems the country has traded in its crown for a dunce cap. The new government has been so incompetently run that the Prime Minister was forced to resign just 45 days after being elected. It sounds like something out of a developing nation trying to find its way in the world, not the United Kingdom. So, what happened here, and can this great nation be saved? Even before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the UK was already having trouble under Boris Johnson's watch. Rising inflation, crippling energy prices, and a competitive labour market had the UK struggling to stay afloat. Then Brexit came along. To truly understand how Liz Truss's new government managed to send it into disarray in a matter of weeks, we must first comprehend the state of the economy they inherited. All these issues combined created an economic landscape that could collapse within days of poor management. Say goodbye to free trade and hello to a 4% economic downturn. That's what Brexit brought to the UK. Who thought it'd be a good idea? But that's not all. With the pandemic and Russia's war, things got even worse for UK citizens. Now they're facing an energy crisis thanks to Putin turning the oil supply into a pawn in his game of chess against the sanctions. Who could have guessed this was the future of one of Europe's leading economies? Things got chilly, both metaphorically and literally, as winter creeped in and the energy demand skyrocketed. In what can only be seen as a cruel joke, the previous Prime Minister chose to tax energy companies instead of using that energy to invest or become more efficient. With the Ukrainian invasion making prices soar even higher, the Prime Minister pushed for UK households to bear the brunt of winter, with no governmental help in sight. His resignation was probably a good thing, a probable blessing for those households struggling with winter pressure. Don't you think? Liz Truss was chosen to be the next Prime Minister following Johnson's resignation on a platform of tax cuts to boost the economy. Moreover, she pledged to make the energy situation her top focus. Truss outlined her strategy to address the high cost of energy just 2 days after taking office as Prime Minister.
Liz Truss will announce a freeze to average domestic energy bills at £2,500 for up to 2 years.
The cost of energy used for households was to be capped by her government. No matter how high energy costs actually rise, this would set a limit on the annual energy bills at about £2,500. Sadly, the announcement was swiftly overshadowed by Queen Elizabeth's death that same day. Where were you when this news was announced? The nation entered a period of mourning, and the new Prime Minister helped the UK say goodbye to its cherished monarch. Following almost 2 weeks of grieving, Truss's Chancellor unveiled a mini-budget, also known as the Growth Plan, to revive the economy. Huge tax cuts were the main focus of this budget, which put money back in the hands of the people and ideally assist in reducing the rising expense of living. When you consider giving extra money to those who are struggling with rising prices, this logic may make sense, but in practice, it never truly succeeds. Can you venture a guess as to why? Prices are going up because there isn't enough energy supply in Europe. In addition, the labor market is tight. The issue is primarily on the supply side. Giving individuals more money will not solve the money supply problems, because more people can now spend on the same finite number of things. The price increase will only accelerate. Additionally, tax cuts encounter strong opposition from the general public because they benefit the top 1% twice as much as the ordinary earner. The government would also have to spend almost £130 billion to pay for both plans and the administration's strategy to finance this by taking out loans on the open market and by issuing bonds. They were not pleased with the government's policy towards public markets. It appears that investors have recently lost faith in the UK government's ability to control the economy as word of the new strategy spreads.
The British pound touches a record low against the dollar as investors make known their displeasure over London's big spending plans.
Now, the pound's value dropped after UK's new Chancellor announced a controversial tax-cutting mini-budget on Friday.
We've seen the pound fall to its lowest level in 37 years.
Analysts say the recent drop was a consequence of investors taking fright at the thought of how much money the government will have to borrow to pay for the sweeping tax cuts.
The pound fell by one of the most significant amounts ever, just 4 days after the mini-budget was announced. Investors were exchanging their pounds at a record rate for a more reliable currency, such as the US dollar. Due to this enormous sell-off, the bond market was entirely upside down. What would you have done in this situation? So, let's quickly review bond prices since it's important to do so in order to comprehend the depth of the UK financial crisis. Bond prices are determined by the amount of people who want to buy them, similar to how stock prices are determined. The interest rate on bonds is set by the issuing party, in this case, the government, and does not change, even if the price of the bond goes up or down. If there is high demand for a bond, then the price of the bond will go up, and vice versa. The yield is the percentage of return on investment that an investor receives from owing a bond. When bond prices go up, the yield goes down, and when bond prices go down, the yield goes up. Make sense? Many investors intended to liquidate their pound-denominated bonds in the current UK circumstances. As a result, the bonds' prices fell and their yield increased. People who exchanged their bonds for pounds later exchanged those pounds for other currencies, thus depreciating the value of the pound. The situation deteriorated to the point where the IMF was forced to urge the UK government to review its tax policies in a statement. And for citizens, the collapse of the pound just made it worse. Energy imports will become more expensive as a result of the increasing expenses, which will almost certainly be passed on to consumers, unless the government develops a more capable strategy. The fall in the value of the pound and the increase in bond yield also sparked a string of financial events that put the entire UK economy in danger. The pension fund problem was the most hazardous of them. The pension fund issue could grow to be more significant than the 2008 disaster. Naturally, we must look back to 2008 to understand what went wrong with UK's pension funds.
Too big to fail. I mean, UK pension funds effectively are that to the UK.
The pensions world have been quite surprised to find that so much kind of debt, if you like, has been accumulated by pension funds.
What people are very worried about is the use of derivatives, the use of coping strategies for the pensions industry that did not necessarily have all the assets it would need to cover its liabilities as well.
Many UK pension funds faced a challenging situation where they could no longer simply invest in safe bonds and pay people their pensions from their interest payments when the central banks throughout the world slashed their interest rates in 2008 to help their economies recover. As a result, pension funds decided to utilize some of their cash to invest in riskier assets in order to earn better returns. They engage in a complex derivative exchange with financial institutions like BlackRock, using some cash or bonds as collateral to counter this heightened risk. Similar to when a short seller of a corporation receives a margin call if the stock price rises, forcing them to post more money as security. A lot more work went into the actual derivative trade that these pension funds made than simply selling a stock short. But that gives you an idea of how it worked. Before we go over how decreased bond prices really affected investors, take a second, subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate it. As a result, the price of the bonds soon decreased as investors began to sell their bonds in the wake of the mini-budget announcements. The pension funds received margin calls and requests for additional cash collateral as bond prices dropped and rates increased. The funds didn't have enough cash on hand to cover the margin calls because this decrease happened so suddenly and abruptly. In order to raise the necessary funds, they decided to sell off bonds. Consequently, more bonds were being sold by bond funds, and when bond values dropped, more money was needed as collateral, forcing funds to continue selling bonds. All of this may sound very niche, but the UK economy was actually at risk. So risky that the Bank of England had to intervene to prevent the collapse of the entire economy. The Bank of England declared that it would begin purchasing these assets in order to prevent a liquidity crisis in pension funds and lessen the impact on bond prices. Even though the bond market stabilized following this announcement, investors' faith in the UK government remained low. The Chancellor delayed the new tax cuts because of the intense criticism, and a few days later, Liz Truss resigned as Prime Minister of the UK after only 45 days. If you're looking for economic unrest, the UK is the place to be. We can't say the same for our videos though. Keep watching them and stay informed.